You know, not every story starts with flashing lights or royal headlines. Sometimes it begins somewhere so ordinary, so small you'd almost miss it. That's exactly where this one began. A quiet room, laughter spilling casually. The kind of light chatter you'd barely notice, except something heavy was about to unfold. Among the people gathered, there was Serena Williams. Yeah, the Serena Williams, someone whose silence has always carried more weight than 1,000 words. Someone who doesn't speak unless there's something to say. And when she does, you better believe it matters. The flow of the evening shifted in a heartbeat when a whisper drifted across the table. And this wasn't about tennis or fashion or even Meghan Markle's whirlwind royal story. No, this was a remark that at first seemed small, almost insignificant, but it had the sharpness of a knife. Meghan's real age. At first, no one reacted, but Serena did. Her legendary composure, the one that dominates courts and headlines alike, faltered just slightly. Her back leaned into the chair, eyes narrowing, and then, softly, almost under her breath but loud enough to freeze the room, she asked, "How did she have kids?" It wasn't malice, it wasn't idle gossip, it was instinct. Serena's question came from decades of honing the ability to spot a flaw before the serve even lands. Those who knew her understood. If she asked, she already sensed something deeper. And in that quiet room, that question, that simple question, hung in the air like a bomb. To understand why Serena's words hit so hard, you have to pull apart Meghan's carefully constructed timeline. Officially, Meghan Markle was born in August 1981. Graduated from Northwestern University in 2003 at age 22. Sounds neat, right? Perfectly tidy. But stories that look too perfect rarely are. Dig deeper, and the photos, the alumni bulletins, they start whispering a different story. There's Meghan at a salsa club group shot, her smile radiant, yes, but the people around her, born in the early 70s, nearly a decade ahead academically. Some were already out of high school by the late 80s, years before Meghan was supposedly navigating her high school halls in 1999. These weren't random overlaps. These were her peers, her circle. And yet, if Meghan was really 22 in 2003, how could this be? The math didn't add up. And when numbers refuse to fit, the foundation of the story begins to crack. That's exactly what Serena recognized. Her question wasn't cruel, it was inevitable. Because if Meghan's age didn't match her biography, then everything connected to that age, pregnancies, milestones, her image as the radiant modern royal mother, suddenly felt theatrical. Consider the pregnancies. From the outside, it looked flawless. A smiling duchess, hands cradling her bump at every appearance, the world applauding each photo. But the details, they tug at the edges of the illusion. In some images, her bump sat high and round. Days later, it seemed smaller, lower, almost reshaped. And let's be honest, cameras don't lie. Not when royal photographers obsess over every tilt of a hat. Then came the footage that quietly went viral, the so-called moon bump video. Meghan easing into a chair, smiling until the curve of her stomach folded unnaturally, bending in ways no real pregnancy should. The palace dismissed it as angles, fabric, lighting. But once seen, it's impossible to unsee. Add that to Serena's sudden doubt and the unease becomes undeniable. But the whispers don't stop there. Those closest to Meghan, people living backstage, quietly admit oddities. One assistant recalled seeing Meghan, heavily pregnant on paper, move with the agility of someone far from term. Another said she never saw her belly fully exposed, always covered, always guarded, a bump visible to the world, yet hidden from those standing just a few feet away. Fragment by fragment, the pieces built a picture Serena couldn't ignore, a narrative that didn't match reality. And her instinct? It could only lead to one question. Was Meghan ever really pregnant? The silence that followed Serena's question wasn't casual. It was heavy, almost suffocating. Long after the room emptied, it lingered. No one answered, but the question, it echoed quietly, ready to unravel everything built on the official story. This wasn't gossip anymore, this was a seed of a mystery. Think back to Meghan's first pregnancy announcement, overwhelming coverage. Tabloids splashed her radiant smile on every front page. Royal watches camped outside events. Glossy magazines printed spreads celebrating the next chapter of the Windsor fairy tale. Every detail choreographed. Outfits designed to highlight the bump. Speeches laced with maternal warmth. Photos curated to perfection. Yet, sharp-eyed observers noticed something, a rhythm that didn't match the music. At events, Meghan glided through crowds, heels clicking, posture straight, effortless. Staff whispered, she never looked winded, never paused, never displayed stiffness common in late pregnancy. The grace? It seemed almost rehearsed. Then, that infamous video where her stomach appeared to shift unnaturally as she lowered herself into a chair. Palace response? Camera angle. But the footage didn't fade. Doctors, mothers, everyday viewers replayed it, asking themselves, could this be explained? Even those willing to believe began to feel uneasy. And then, hours after supposedly giving birth, Meghan stepped into the spotlight. Hair flawless, makeup glowing, dress perfect, heels clicking against the palace floor. No signs of discomfort, hesitation, soreness, fatigue, almost as if nothing had happened. The image, too polished, too perfect. For those behind the scenes, the oddities piled up. Schedule surprisingly full, very few adjustments, rarely canceled events, rarely shortened appearances, no visible need for medical assistance or breaks. The everyday gaps, the small moments where reality should peek through, never did. Meanwhile, records that could silence speculation remained sealed. Medical files, doctor names, confirmations, all hidden. Every press query met with silence, and that silence grew heavier. So, the pieces were stacking up. Ever-changing bump, the moon bump video, lightning-fast recovery, sealed records, whispers from staff. Individually, maybe explainable. Together, they painted a picture no royal press office could erase. What unsettled people most wasn't even deception itself, it was the precision. Every photograph, every appearance, every statement was orchestrated to reinforce the image of the glowing, perfect royal mother. And in that perfection lay unease. Because real life, it's never flawless. And once cracks appear, they spread. Inside the palace, silence spoke louder than words. Every aide, staff member, and medical professional connected to Meghan's story seemed bound by an invisible code. Questioning the narrative wasn't just risky, it was dangerous. Exile from employment, from influence, even social ostracism. Loyalty wasn't expected, it was demanded. But outside those walls, people started piecing things together. Photographs, clips, whispers, yearbook records. Each a shard of a broken mirror reflecting a version of Meghan that didn't match the fairy tale. The inconsistencies became impossible to ignore. The bump shifting high to low, the flawless post-birth appearances, the absence of verifiable records. Together, it formed a narrative that looked more constructed than lived. Medical experts weighed in quietly, off the record. Some called her recovery highly unusual. Others suggested it bordered on medically implausible. Not conspiracy theorists, professionals, people trained to recognize what's real and what's staged. And the stakes? Far beyond Meghan herself. She represented modern royalty, a bridge between tradition and progress. But if her story's foundation was shaky, the image built upon it became unstable. The royal brand thrives on trust, on authenticity. Shatter that, and even the monarchy itself could wobble. That's why secrecy became strategy. Not because the palace could prove the truth, but because admitting cracks could unravel everything. And the most haunting part of this mystery, the question that started it all. How did she have kids? It's a question that slices through spin, hitting something primal. Children, family, birth, universal experiences. To cast doubt on them shakes identity itself. That's why Serena's instinct carried so much weight. She wasn't a journalist, she wasn't an outsider, she was close enough to see what didn't feel right. And when someone like Serena raises a question, it echoes. The story lingers, not in headlines, not in statements, but in spaces between, in sealed files, in staff who saw too much but said too little, in photographs that provoke more questions than answers. The full truth may be locked away forever, but locked doors? They don't erase suspicion, they amplify it. History has a way of surfacing what was buried. A stray document, a staff member willing to speak, a slip in a rehearsed narrative. Anyone could ignite the truth. Until then, the story survives in fragments, whispers, archives, glimpses pieced together by those who dare to question. And what endures? Not the image of perfection Meghan and the palace projected. What endures is the shadow cast by doubt. Because real life isn't perfect. Pregnancy isn't flawless. Recovery isn't instant. And no child enters this world without leaving traces, emotional, physical, undeniable. Yet the story told to the public, radiant smiles, flawless hair, perfect outfits, every detail choreographed to reinforce an illusion. And in that illusion, the question lingers, haunting every frame. Did it really happen? Or was it theater? This is the mystery that lives on in whispers and shadows, behind the doors of palaces, in staff offices, in photographs archived and hidden. A story unfolds that few dare to tell out loud. A story that challenges the narrative of modern royalty, of motherhood, of truth itself. And while the world applauds the glowing Duchess, some watch more closely. Some notice the cracks. Some remember Serena's question, the one that cut through everything. How did she have kids? That's the question that refuses to leave. That's the question that keeps gossip alive, fuels debate, and shadows every public appearance. Because perfection, as it turns out, is never quite what it seems. And sometimes, the smallest whisper can unravel the biggest story. The story isn't over. The documents remain sealed. Staff remain silent. The photographs continue to speak in fragments. And the question? Still echoing, still waiting for answers. The public may never know the full truth, but the shadows, the whispers, the inconsistencies, they live on. And for those who look closely, the mystery of Meghan's motherhood is far from solved.